Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Tackling Islamophobia in the Media. My name is Amanda. I'm your trainer for this evening. And just before I begin, a couple items of housekeeping. Obviously, it is bonfire night, and outside my house, it sounds like a war zone. So I would ask that everybody please mute your microphones. Otherwise, we will get quite a lot of background noise. Even if you haven't got fireworks going on in the background, please keep your microphones muted unless you are asking a question or making a comment, inshallah. Also, if you could all please switch off your cameras. This is just to make sure that all of our participants are able to see the screen, are able to see the presentation as well. And because we are actually recording this session and may in the future upload it online. So we want to make sure that everybody else's cameras are off so that we don't have anybody inadvertently appearing on the screen. I'm on my own this evening, so I am admitting people as we go. I'm having to do all of the admin as well as the presentation, so do bear with me. Let me just, housekeeping, yes, I did ask everybody please to keep their microphones off, keep your cameras switched off. If at any time you want to ask a question, please feel free. You can use the raise hand function in Zoom, or you can alert me somehow. You can put a note into the meeting, into the chat window. That's another option. I would prefer that people not just unmute themselves, if that's okay, and start talking. That can get a little bit confusing for other participants. So if you can put the question into the chat window or raise your hand, and I will address your question as soon as I can. Therefore, without any further ado, let's begin. Let me just bring up my presentation. Okay, so just to make you all aware, I can see the chat window. So if you have any questions, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, I will be able to answer your questions as soon as they come up, I hope. I am also admitting people as they come in. Let's see if this is working. Bismillah. Okay. So today's presentation is Tackling Islamophobia in the Media, and this is our first event as part of Islamophobia Awareness Month 2020. Islamophobia Awareness Month is, of course, an annual commemorative month that was set up by MCB and several other Muslim organizations such as MEND in order to raise awareness about Islamophobia and the different ways it impacts people's lives. As I said, my name is Amanda Morris. I'm your trainer this evening, or your presenter this evening. I am the Community Liaison Officer at the Center for Media Monitoring. So I'd like to welcome you all this evening, and I hope that you find it beneficial. Just to start off, oops. Admitting more people into the waiting room. Just to start off, I would like to introduce you to the Muslim Council of Britain and to the Center for Media Monitoring. I'm sure for some of you this is repeat information, but for those of us who are new, I'd like to cover the basics. So the Muslim Council of Britain is a national representative Muslim umbrella body. And we have over 500 affiliates at national, regional, and local levels. This would include mosques, Muslim schools, Muslim charities, and other Muslim-led organizations as well. We are non-sectarian. We are inclusive of all organizations, mosques, charities, and schools throughout mainstream Muslim denominations, both Sunni and Shia. Now, the Center for Media Monitoring, perhaps many of you have heard of the Muslim Council of Britain, but the Center for Media Monitoring is a newer, a more recent endeavor. We are a project of the Muslim Council of Britain, which was set up in 2018. And our aim is really quite simple. It's just to counter the current negative media narrative surrounding Muslims and Islam in the British media. We have three main areas of work. The first one is monitoring, complaints, and analysis, which is something that goes on day in and day out. It's rather endless. Our second main area is working with media and journalists on best practice and engaging with them, advising them on their output and so on. And then what I do, which is media skills training for Muslim communities. I just heard my WhatsApp go off, so I'm going to mute that. Now, I would very much love it if all of you would follow us on the various social media platforms where we have a presence. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and we are on Instagram. Probably our most active social media is Twitter, but we are present on the other two platforms as well. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of media today with regard to Muslims and Islam and their representation, if you want to keep abreast of all of our events, our publications, and so on, please do give us a follow. So today's workshop, for many of you, this may be repeat information. You may be fully aware of the narrative that is being pushed by some parts of the media regarding Muslims and Islam. However, for some of you, this may be new information. So I'm going to walk us through the main narratives that are more common today, and then we will take a look at the things that we can do to combat this. We'll look at one particular case study as well to see exactly how far some parts of the media are willing to go to keep this narrative alive. So the first part we're going to do is to look at what exactly is the problem. We need to understand the narratives if we're going to be able to tackle them. And then we're going to look at what are the solutions. Now, of course, there are many potential solutions, and we're going to look at just a few of them, things that we can do very easily from the comfort of our own home. It doesn't take too much time. But these things help us to take control of the narrative. And I will take us step by step through how to get a complaint to the media done correctly or done in the most effective way. And then I'll also look at some other ways that we can tackle what is going on. Again, for those of you who have joined us just now, housekeeping rules, please do keep microphones and cameras off. And if you have any questions, pop them into the chat and I will answer them as we go along. Please feel free to ask your questions at any time. I don't mind being interrupted, and I do really like it when I can interact with an audience. I usually do these workshops in person, and it is a little bit of a challenge since lockdown, having done them online since March, I guess. Now I've lost track, but you know, we have to adapt. So if we can all just pop our questions into the chat, that will be really useful. And I'd love to hear your questions and your comments as well, please. You can put questions and comments either to me privately, or you can do it to everybody. It's up to you, whichever one you prefer. So today we are living in 2020, and we are living in a time when we have information at our fingertips. There has never been a time like this in the history of mankind where you can find out anything you want to find out within just a few clicks of your mouse, which is fantastic. It is an amazing thing, and the media can be such an amazing force for good. However, as these headlines show, there are certain problems within this flood of information. Not least of all is a consistent stream of misinformation about Muslims and Islam that is being published. Now, if I ask all of you, and here's where the interaction comes in, I'm going to ask all of you, take a look at this image and tell me which of these headlines really jumps out at you and why. I'll give you a couple minutes to take a look, and then you can pop your comments into the chat, but I want to know which of these headlines jumps out at you most and why. So somebody said Muslim-related ones. All of these headlines are Muslim-related. Which one in particular jumps out at you? Somebody has said Ramadan a ding-dong because it's so patronizing and mocking of our faith. Absolutely. Yep, the ding-dong one, Isabel. Yes, absolutely. Brilliant. Any other comments or headlines that are particularly troublesome to you? Plot to kill the Pope. Of course, yes, that's a good one. Violence-related ones, for example, thugs, attacking Christianity, all of them making us out to be the other. Well spotted. Somebody else has commented about Christian under attack, which is playing with far-right conspiracies. Absolutely. Judge orders woman to uncover her face. The Sun demands vital reforms. Somebody else, Muslim thugs unveiled, Christianity under attack, pitting one against another, and Muslims tell British, suggest Muslims and Britishness are mutually exclusive. Exactly. Very well spotted. Jazakallah khair for that input. I think you all have seen a lot of these headlines. You understand exactly what the problem is. I'll tell you, for me, the one that really hits me is the unveiled one, simply because, you know, as a woman, regardless of my faith, I am constantly under scrutiny for how I'm dressed. And as a Muslim woman, I am constantly under threat of having how I choose to dress forcibly removed. So this one specifically especially hit home for me, this kind of headline. I found this particularly threatening. So the challenge that we face, most of the headlines that you will find problematic in the media today fall within a few particular narrative types, or a few particular stereotypes, I should say. We have one here. I'm just going to take you through a few examples that we found over the years. And granted, these are a little bit older, but it just sort of gives you an idea of the scope of the problem. We have the first one, Ramadan train wreck. Muslim train driver crashed after going without food or drink for 15 hours during Ramadan. The next one we have reads, new £5 notes could be banned by religious groups because the banks can't promise that they're halal. Another one, gunman screaming Allahu Akbar opens fire in Spanish supermarket while wearing suicide vest filled with gasoline and gunpowder. And then, of course, the by now infamous 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadis. Now, these are all quite inflammatory headlines, and we can put them into different categories. So the one to do with Ramadan train wreck falls into what I often refer to as the demonization of Muslim acts of worship. The new £5 notes could be banned by religious groups because the bank can't promise that they're halal falls under this idea of Muslims always demanding special treatment. Gunman screaming Allahu Akbar, again, is demonization of Muslim acts of worship, but also the idea that Muslims have a battle cry, that anybody saying Allahu Akbar is about to commit an act of horrendous violence. And then we have the 1 in 5 British Muslims sympathy for jihadis, which, as we know, was completely skewed by the newspapers who published it, but it makes it look as though there are sections of the Muslim community, and rather large sections of the Muslim communities, who simply do not fit in with British society, who are enemies in our midst, so to speak. So some very common narratives and tropes that parts of the British media will use when reporting on Muslims and Islam. Some of these are listed. This is not an exhaustive list, but of course there's the not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim. A lot of the coverage that we see is doing absolutely nothing to dispel this erroneous idea. We also have the trope that Islam is inherently anti-Semitic. And this especially comes about in politics when you find people protesting against the treatment of the Palestinian people and criticism of the state of Israel. You find this labeled as being anti-Semitic. And if it happens to be Muslims doing it, this is because they are Muslim, apparently. You have the notion of taqiyya, which, for those of you who aren't aware, taqiyya is this idea that Muslims seek to deceive non-Muslims. If you think about in times of war, a country will have state secrets, and it is an act of treason to let those secrets out to your enemy. This is common in any wartime, but those people who seek to demonize Islam claim that Muslims are constantly in this state, and therefore we keep secrets and twist the truth in order to hide our true intention from the general public, which is, of course, false. The idea of Allahu Akbar as a battle cry. I mean, for those of us who are Muslim, this is laughable. For those of us in the audience who are not from the Muslim background, you may not know this, but Muslims say Allahu Akbar constantly throughout the day. It's an act of worship, it's a word of remembering God, and it's something that we say constantly. So if it were a battle cry, we would be not saying this throughout the day as we do. We have, of course, demonization of daily religious practices. One that happened very recently was the inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombings, heard that the perpetrator of that crime had been, and I quote, seen praying just before he committed his crime. And the implication being that it was suspicious to see somebody praying in a public space. This, of course, leads to Muslim men and women feeling as though they cannot pray in a public space because they may be seen as potentially about to commit a terrorist offense. Again, Muslim women as oppressed, as voiceless, as lacking agency. And the irony here is that even when Muslim women speak up to defend the fact that we do have a voice and we are not oppressed and we do have agency, we are told that our voice doesn't count in anything. We have the idea of Muslim men as a threat to Western, and by Western I mean white women. The idea of refugees coming into a country being a threat to the safety of the white women who live in that society is especially prevalent in some parts of the media. And then we have, of course, all of these really fall under the clash of civilizations narrative. This notion that Islam is in opposition with Judeo-Christian values, that Muslims can never be truly part of British society, and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of narratives and the kind of tropes and stereotypes that we are trying to push back against. And there are many ways that these are represented in the media, too many to cover in one workshop, to be honest. I have people in the waiting room. 1 second, please. Okay. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Just a reminder to everybody, keep your microphones off, please, and your cameras off. And if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat window. So the Center for Media Monitoring has been doing research for a number of years, well, since 2018. And in our most recent annual report, these were some of our findings. So in our methodology, we look at articles that are published on any given day containing a set number of keywords which relate to Muslims and Islam. Overall, over the course of a year, we analyzed 10,931 such articles. And the most recurring theme relating to Muslims and Islam was terrorism in those 10,000 articles. 59% of all of those articles associated Muslims with negative behavior. So even the articles that were not relating to terrorism and terrorist offenses still related to negative behavior. 37% of the articles in right-leaning publications, we were made to class as very biased according to our methodology, meaning that they carried many factors that were painting Muslims or Islam in a negative light. And over 1/3 of all articles, whether positive or negative or neutral, misrepresented or generalized about Muslims. So you can see that we are basically swimming upstream against a tide of misinformation and generalization. Now, what does this manage? What happens then in the real world? If you think about it, the fact of the matter is Muslims in the UK account for slightly under 5% of the whole population, which means that 95% of the UK population is not of the Muslim faith. And probably the vast majority of those people have never either met a Muslim person, or even if they have not had the opportunity to have a meaningful interaction, let alone any kind of a friendship or relationship with a Muslim individual. And this means that the only information that these people have about Muslims and Islam must come from the media or the internet. And this, of course, because of the misinformation that is being spread, has a real world impact. If you look at these statistics here, we have some surveys which were taken. This was from Show Racism the Red Card. And they found that 15% and 16%, so 31% total of young people surveyed either agreed or partially agreed that Muslims are taking over England. 41% of young people believed that forced marriages are commonplace in Islam. And again, a large number believed that Muslims contribute positively to society in England. So there is some good things that people think about Muslims, but there is equally very negative connotations. We can see that 18% of people surveyed believe that Muslim immigration to the UK is part of a bigger plan to make Muslims a majority of the country's population. 32% believe that there are no-go areas in Britain where Sharia law is dominant, where non-Muslims cannot enter. And 56% believe that Islam, and I should note here, not fundamentalist groups, not deviant groups, not terrorist groups, but that Islam itself poses a threat to Western liberal democracy. So there are real world implications. The media does form people's opinions. And the impact of this is that both the University of Cambridge and the University of Leicester have published papers saying that the media, and in the case of the University of Leicester, politicians, are helping to fuel hate crime in Britain. Now, it's not just academics and Muslim organizations and activists who are saying this. Journalists themselves and people engaged with the media and involved in the media are also saying that there is a problem. The recently retired head of the Independent Press Standards Organization said that Muslims are treated differently by newspapers. And the new editor of the Daily Express, who has engaged with the Center for Media Monitoring quite a lot, has actually said that a lot of the formerly published front pages before he became editor were downright offensive. And he has stated that he is very eager to change how that newspaper publishes things. Somebody's asking, is it possible to get a list of readings, research around this? Yes, of course. What I will do is I will be sending out, hopefully, a PDF version of these slides for you to take a look at. All of the information should be there. Also, our research is available on our website, which is cfmm.org.uk. Within the next couple of days, I'll send out a follow-up email, which will have links to the website, inshallah. Somebody is saying, was this broken down by area to see the difference between areas where there are larger Muslim populations? That's a very good question, one to which I do not know the answer. But hopefully I'll be able to send out information, links, and so on, and you can take a look at that yourself. Because I'm sure, yes, there probably would be a difference. Let's take a look at one particular case study, shall we? This is the case study of the Muslim foster family, which came out a couple of years ago in the Times. Now, the Times is a right-leaning newspaper, but it is not the one people usually think of when they think of media reports that demonize Muslims. I'm going to ask you a question very quickly. Type in the chat window, what do you all think are the worst newspapers for misrepresenting Muslims and Islam in the UK? The Sun, I think that goes without saying, yes. The Daily Mail, okay. Telegraph, Mirror, The Express, and so on and so forth. Yes, Daily Express, The Sun, the Daily Mail, okay. So as you know, and I agree with you, these papers aren't great. Any tabloid. That's the key there, is the tabloid newspapers have the worst reputation. And this is why people don't think of the Times. Although the Times is a right-leaning paper, they think of it as it's a broadsheet. It has this veneer of respectability. Most people on the street, if you ask them about the Times, they think it's an okay paper. And this story was abominable. That's actually a polite word for it. We're going to go into it in a little bit of depth here for those who aren't familiar with it. For those who are, it will be a reminder of just how bad reporting can get. So we had 4 days of front page coverage on the Times talking about a young girl who had been taken into care from her mother. Tragic situation, no matter what was happening. Day one's headline read, "Christian child forced into Muslim foster care. Concern for girl who had cross removed and was encouraged to learn Arabic." So what we see here, if I can paint a visual picture for you, is a young white girl, and they did say later in the article that she was white, a young white girl, presumably of a Christian background, torn from her mother's care by police and placed with a Muslim foster family. And you can see here is the Muslim foster mother here in this photograph that they used. They painted a very frightening picture. They are saying that her cross was removed, her crucifix necklace, that she was told that she had to learn Arabic. You can imagine the uproar that this headline alone caused. But that wasn't enough. The next day, we have this headline. Judge rules child to leave the Muslim foster home. So the judge in the case ruled that the child should leave the Muslim foster home and be put into the custody of her maternal grandmother, her mother's mother. And this was hailed as a victory, that the Times newspaper had done something amazing, that they had raised awareness of this deplorable act of child abuse and rescued this poor child from her evil foster family who didn't speak English. Day 3, we have the headline that Tower Hamlets Council, where the child lived, has come under fire for fostering the Christian girl with Muslims. And again, a pixelated photograph of a young blonde girl with a woman wearing all black. And then on day 4, we have this very ambiguous headline: child in Muslim foster home row may be taken out of Britain. So 4 days, 4 headlines. The bias alone is huge, as somebody's pointed out in the comments. Interested to know how they got their sources. We will cover that. But what as somebody said, what about Muslims who are fostered by non-Muslims? This is a great bias. Yes, of course it is. But we have 4 days here of very biased reporting, as Mariam has pointed out. Nobody talks about Muslims being fostered by non-Muslims. But let's look at the coverage, how it really came about. We'll go into the next one. So we have fact versus fiction on this case. And this case was actually 4 days worth of so-called news reporting that was, for the most part, completely fictional. It wasn't just that they had mistaken some facts or been biased in their reporting. A great deal of it was actually made up. So what was false? We have in the articles statements indicating that the child was distressed, that she didn't want to be with this foster family, that she was complaining about them. We have allegations that the family didn't speak English, that they were telling the child to learn Arabic, and the child saying that she didn't understand Arabic. We have reports that the foster carer removed the child's cross necklace, her crucifix necklace, and took it away from her. We have stories that the family was against Christmas and Easter because they were not Islamic holidays. And we have reports that the first Muslim foster family, because she stayed with 2 Muslim families, but that in the first family, the mother wore niqab. Now, what is actually the truth in this story? The fact was, and this was statements that were reported by the judge. The reporting in this case drew so much attention that the judge, overhearing the custody case, decided to release a statement in order to put the rumors to rest. And in her statement, she noted that the child actually had a very good relationship with her foster mother in both families. She noted that the family spoke English. Now, as many of you are commenting, and I'm sorry, I can't read through all the comments that quickly, but as many of you are commenting, there are many Muslim families who foster, but fostering is not something to get into easily. You, of course, go through a very rigorous vetting process. And the least of that is that you have to actually be able to speak English, of course. So the idea of a Tower Hamlets Council approved foster family not being able to speak any English is obviously false and obviously a lie. And of course, the truth was the foster family spoke English at home. The child's necklace. Now, the foster mother did remove this from her because it was large and it was gold and it was highly valuable and not really something suitable for a small child to be wearing. And she gave it to the child's grandmother for safekeeping. The family, who is supposedly anti-Christmas and anti-Easter, actually had an Easter egg hunt in their home for the girl. And the part about the woman who wore niqab, well, she didn't. That was a lie. She wore hijab. But even if she did wear niqab, that doesn't preclude her from being a good foster carer. But the very idea that this was a white Christian British child was in and of itself not accurate. While their mother of the child does identify as being of Christian heritage, her grandmother, who the courts awarded full custody to, is Muslim. Although she's described as being a non-practicing Muslim, she is nevertheless Muslim. And she has stated that she is going to take the child back to her home country in order to raise her there. Interestingly, the point about the family not being able to speak English, apparently this child's grandmother doesn't speak very good English because she was having to have all of the court documents translated for her. So this was not, in fact, as the newspapers presented, a clear-cut case of a white Christian British child being removed from her family and put with these foreign Muslims. This was a case of a child of mixed ethnic heritage who is British, whose mother identified as Christian, but who also had Muslim heritage, being given to a Muslim foster family. But more than that, this was a case of a child who was removed from her mother's care because her mother was addicted to alcohol and drugs. The judge in the case ordered that her alcohol consumption be monitored and that her drug use be monitored as well. She was ordered to undertake random testing and to be tagged for alcohol consumption. The grandmother, who was given full custody, as we said, is Muslim. What happened in this case was the mother of the child, who understandably was incredibly distressed at having her child taken out of her care, contacted the journalist who wrote the story and told him her side of the story. The journalist did not fact check before publishing the story. He did get in touch with different fostering organizations, apparently, who advised him that there are two sides to every story and that he should contact the other side before he published anything, but he chose to run the story anyway. Such was the degree to which this demonization of Muslims was pushed ahead. But it's just a story in a newspaper. How does this impact us? Well, of course, the Times, and this isn't the first time this has happened with this particular newspaper, the Times publishes what looks like a story about a case, and the far right started to share it and retweet it. Now, these are 3 screenshots. There were many more than this, but we have the main players of the extreme right. Tommy Robinson, simply retweeting the story, Christian child forced into Muslim foster care. We have Britain First asking, why is this allowed to happen? Never mind that every year 1,500 Muslim children are placed with non-Muslim foster families and nobody bats an eyelid or writes newspaper articles about it. But with one child, Britain First is asking, why is this allowed to happen? And the English Defence League perhaps went the farthest with their hashtag adoption jihad in Tower Hamlets, London, while retweeting the original article. So some very nefarious statements on social media there, encouraging members of the extreme far right to push this idea and to be angry, obviously very inflammatory statements. So that was just one case study of how some papers publish stories and publish factual inaccuracies that ends up having real-world impact on Muslims on the ground. I have spoken to people who have said that they are afraid to become foster carers because of that story. But fortunately, most people are now even more determined to go into fostering. But these kind of things do have real world impact. Sorry, just admitting some people in the waiting room. So now the question comes, what can we do about this? Because it does seem like we are fighting a losing battle, swimming uphill, so to speak, or swimming upstream, so to speak. But there is a lot that we can do. However, what we have to bear in mind is that it isn't something that has a quick fix. The first thing that we can do is to build an evidence base that there is actually a problem, that it isn't just anecdotal. We need to en masse identify these false stories and where we can get them corrected. So at the Center for Media Monitoring, I have this here, we've had almost 100 corrections from national newspapers and broadcasters. We've had a lot more than this now, more than double this number now. And we are building an evidence base with academically agreed methodologies, which you can read in our first report and our report on terrorism as well. Those are both available on our website, which you will be sent links to, inshallah. So the first step is building a base of evidence that there actually is a problem. And this is what we are working on right now. And it actually is quite a challenge because, of course, the Center for Media Monitoring does this and a few other organizations do this. But what we really need is for the community at the grassroots level in large numbers, whenever we see something, to take action in the right way. And I hear a lot of excuses as to why people don't want to bother doing that. The most common ones I hear are the following. Number one is too much hassle, the old apathy excuse. The second one I hear is, well, I don't know how to complain. Again. And then even if I complain, nothing will be done, or even if I complain, nothing will happen. Now, to answer these three excuses, and I do call them excuses, too much hassle. Well, I'm going to tell you that it only takes about 10 minutes to do a media complaint. And when I say 10 minutes, I'm talking about when you first learn how to do it, that's about how long it's going to take. Once you actually know what you're doing and you've had a bit of practice, it doesn't take that long at all. I don't know how. Well, I'm going to show you how today, and it's actually super easy. And then even if I complain, nothing will be done, or even if I complain, nothing will happen. This is a common complaint. And I will tell you the truth. Sometimes you will make a complaint and it won't change. But you will have evidence of that complaint. We will be able to add it to our body of evidence of that complaint. But more than that, I'm going to show you the key ways in which your complaint is more likely to get a change made in the papers. Many of us make the mistake of getting angry at what we're reading or getting emotional about what we're reading and writing to the newspapers and talking about how offended we are. This isn't the best way to engage with the papers, and we'll talk about why. I can see that Mohammed Yakini has his hand up. Did you put a question in the question that I missed? Or did you want to say something?
I just want to ask the question about the reports, and then so about the impact of these misrepresentations and on the Muslims' mental well-being. So I don't know if that's something that you might be covering in, or that's just something I just wanted to make inquiries on.
Jazakallah khair for your question. That's actually a very good question. And it's not something that I am actually going to cover, but sorry, somebody's asking, how do you raise your hand? If you click on the button that shows all of the participants, there should be a raise hand button right at the bottom of that. So when it shows you the link of all of the participants, you should be able to see a raise hand button there. I don't actually talk about the impact on this. However, I was sent an article today from an academic in New Zealand who has written about this topic. So if it's okay with you, what I will do is share that. Let me write myself a note. So I will share that article with you all in the follow-up email, if that's okay. Yeah. So let me write that down for myself before I forget, share New Zealand article. Okay, that's an excellent question. And that is something that we should be looking into. I mean, just speaking on a personal level, You know, looking at these articles day in and day out, as we do at work, can definitely have an impact. And it does raise our stress levels quite a bit, of course. So, you know, for people on the ground who this isn't their work, but they're seeing this constant drip feed of negative messaging, yes, definitely it has an impact, or it can have an impact. And I think that is something that should be studied more. Jazakallah khair for that.
Okay,
Mariam, did you have a question? If you can't figure out how to raise your hand. No? Okay, that's fine. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so let's continue on then. So as I was saying, the first step that we need to do, and this is the step that we are still at right now, is engaging with the media to let them know when they have done something wrong. And this often gets couched as complaining, but it's not necessarily complaining in a whingy way. It's constructively explaining to the media why something is incorrect and how they should correct it. But the question is, who do we do this to? Now, a lot of people, when I do very basic media monitoring workshops, will say, well, I shared it on Facebook. That doesn't work. Retweeting an article with a link to the article really doesn't work to get anything changed. If anything, it just increases traffic to the article in question. What we need to do is engage in the way that the papers have set out. So what we always say is, first thing is to go directly to the media source, whether that is a media publication, so a newspaper, a magazine, or one of their websites, whether that is a broadcaster or the BBC including the broadcasting and their websites as well. Going directly to the media source can often get the changes that we want to see happen. Well, I won't say all, the vast majority of major publications, especially in the UK, have dedicated pages on their websites for you to put in a complaint or a correction. And they are usually quite quick at responding to it and to giving you a reply. But if that doesn't work, or if you can't find out where to go, or if the article that has been written is extremely problematic to a level that you want to escalate it straight away, you can go to IPSO, which is the Independent Press Standards Organization. And we will touch a little bit more on who they are and how to complain to them in a bit. If it is a broadcast media, so for example, television or radio, or any television or radio stations' websites, then they are regulated by Ofcom. And we will again look at who they are in a bit. So again, just to recap, if it's in the first instance, you want to try and engage with the publication or the broadcaster directly by contacting them via their online website. They usually have a form for you to do that. If that doesn't work, if you want to escalate it, or if it was severe enough that you want to escalate it straight away, you can go to IPSO in the case of print media and their websites, or in the case of TV or radio and their websites, you would go to Ofcom. Now let's look at IPSO. For those of you who know, for those of you who don't know, IPSO stands for the Independent Press Standards Organization. Somebody is saying the editor letter tends to be common worldwide. Okay, that's a good point. I'm not talking about writing letters to the editor, although you can feel free to do that. And that's actually something that you can do that's quite positive for just general engagement. I'm talking about using a newspaper's actual complaints section. So many newspapers, when you go onto their website, if you scroll down to the bottom, there will be a link for how to complain or how to correct, or complaints and corrections. That will lead you to a page where you can fill in the information of the article that you found, and you can put in what was incorrect in it and then send it off. Or they will just have an email address there for you to send your correction request to. So it's slightly different from the letter to the editor. So IPSO, again, it stands for the Independent Press Standards Organization. Now, IPSO regulates newspapers and other print publications in the UK, but it is a self-regulatory body. So it's the newspapers basically collectively regulating themselves. And membership is voluntary. There are quite a few papers who are not members of IPSO. Somebody has made a comment, is this applicable internationally or just at the British level? we are talking about the UK context today. Different countries may have similar bodies. For example, Ireland has a similar organization to IPSO. There are other watchdogs in other countries. Whichever country you happen to live in, you would have to find out the regulations where you live. But as I'm saying here, IPSO membership is voluntary. Sorry, another question. But the media org is the one which published the piece. Then why will they bother about a complaint they already approved the publishing? Yes, this is true. However, many times papers, because of the turnover and the speed at which the media cycle operates, they cannot fact check every single article that they publish to the degree that they should. Now, the Muslim foster story was one particularly very bad example, but we're going to look at some other examples that are perhaps a little bit more subtle and not so easy to spot unless you know what you're looking for. These are the kind of things that most people wouldn't even notice as being incorrect, but those of us who are Muslims would notice. And those of you who maybe if you aren't Muslim, but you know something about Muslims and Islam, you would notice it as well. And so you can go and correct them. So simply because they don't have time to fact check every single article that goes out, it's still worth engaging with the publisher themselves to get a correction made. Is that clear? I hope that's clear. Oh, somebody's in the waiting room. Okay. So as I said here, membership is voluntary. It covers print and online editions. And what can they do? So if a paper does something, publishes an incorrect story, and they rule that it has to be corrected, they can order that the publication either correct the story or publish the outcome of the IPSO ruling or apologize. So corrections, outcomes of rulings, and apologies, and any combination of those three. What they can't do is issue financial penalties. And it's this particular weakness in IPSO's regulations that allow newspapers to get away with not being very careful with their fact checking and publishing things before checking and having to correct it after the fact. So this is a common complaint about IPSO. However, they are at the moment the main press regulator in the United Kingdom. And we will talk a little bit more about this later, but one of the things that a lot of organizations are pushing for is to have a tougher regulatory body, which is what the Leveson inquiry recommended at the end of their publication. Okay, so IPSO has several clauses by which newspapers are meant to operate. The ones that concern us, the most relevant codes for us, are Clause 1, which relates to accuracy. The press, and it states, and I'm quoting the actual clauses here, the press must take care not to publish inaccurate, misleading, or distorted information. The clause also says that a story has to make it clear whether a story is fact, opinion, or conjecture. So if it's an opinion piece, they can get away with publishing their opinions, the writer's personal opinions. But if it's a news story, there's a higher standard of factuality that they should be following. Then we have Clause 12, discrimination, which states that the press must not make any prejudicial or pejorative references to an individual's race, color, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, or to any physical or mental illness or disability. So the well-known human rights categories, the protected categories under human rights law, the press cannot make any prejudicial or pejorative, so any derogatory references to these characteristics. But they also cannot make any reference to the above unless it is actually relevant to the story. Now, a lot of the times when we see articles in papers that are problematic, our instinct is to go to Clause 12, discrimination. But we can't necessarily do that, and I'll show you why. And I'm talking here if you're going to go to IPSO. Yeah, IPSO is quite narrow in what they will consider a complaint in. we can't always use clause 12. And most of the times, technically speaking, we shouldn't use clause 12 because of this word here, an individual's race, color, religion, sex, etc. So clause 12 covers individuals, and it is not what we call a third-party clause. So just to clarify that, if there's a newspaper article that talks about a person and makes reference to the color of their skin, which is not relevant to the article, then that person named in the article can issue a complaint to Ipso, and it will probably be upheld. But you or I doing that on their behalf, without them asking us to, we can't do that because we are a third party. Also, if a newspaper publishes any sort of reference to the above named protected characteristics of a group, that doesn't fall under the discrimination clause, unfortunately. And this is something that I have personally pushed and asked Ipso to look into, to widening the discrimination clause, because I believe that this is unfair. There are organizations who are pushing for this as well, that discrimination should apply to groups, or at the very least to institutions such as schools or clubs or organizations or mosques, places of worship, and so on. Most of our complaints, however, will fall under clause 1, accuracy. Because let's be honest, most things that are discriminatory are also not true. And so if we can show that something is inaccurate, we can complain to Ipso under clause 1. Now, all of what I'm saying so far about clause 1 and clause 12 and what we can and can't complain about, this is if you're going to escalate it to Ipso. However, your first step should be trying to contact the paper themselves. And when contacting the paper, you can ask them to make a change, even if it isn't necessarily falling under an Ipso clause guideline. They have a lot more leeway in that. If it falls under Ipso, and if you can invoke an Ipso regulation, they are very likely to look at it. But a lot of editors are very amenable to having somebody say, you know, this isn't the best way to phrase something, you could say it like that, or to point out that something is actually discriminatory, even though you're not the person named, and they are likely to change it. And we have had some changes made dealing with the papers like that. Somebody is saying the MCB should have a special fund to sue the press for articles that are Islamophobic. I hear this a lot, but the thing is, what you can sue the paper for is actually very limited. Islamophobia does not necessarily, well, depending on what is published, it doesn't necessarily break any laws. Now, if it is inciting to violence, yes, of course, that is a legal matter. If it is defamation, if it is, I can't remember the other word right now, it's gone out of my head, but there are certain things that you can sue the press for. So defamation, if they're inciting to violence and so on. But the threshold for being able to actually prosecute a paper for that is very, very high. So what we are working on right now are things that we can do in order to make it more difficult for papers to publish inaccuracies. Yes, I will be sending the presentation, inshallah. Somebody's saying they have to leave. Jazakallah khair for joining us. I hope that you can join us again someday. Okay, oh, there's a comment here that I missed. It's not about being incorrect news. I mean, they clear editorial bias in content or wordings. Example, using the word terrorist if criminal is Muslim, while other wordings with non-Muslims, etc. These editorial biases are already made intentionally by the media outlet, and complaints, in my opinion, won't change them. You know what? We engage with papers and with journalists themselves. And we recently, back in March, we released in August a publication called How the British Media Reports Terrorism. I really encourage you all to read that. But we have been engaging with media outlets. So with the papers, the editors, and the journalists discussing this very matter. As I said earlier on, a lot of people in the UK, 95% of the population are not Muslim. So a lot of people have never really gotten to know Muslim people and really don't know much about Islam and Muslims. And I will say even very, very highly educated people like media journalists and editors do not necessarily know the actual facts about Muslims and Islam, because again, they are subject to their own industry's biases. They learn from their own industry's biases. Through engaging with them, we can make a change because we can get them to understand better the problems with the reporting. Now, this isn't something that's going to change overnight. We have to be in this for the long game. I've been involved with the Center for Media Monitoring for nearly 3 years now. Before that, I was involved with another organization for about 2 years. And I can say with confidence that I am seeing changes, but they are bit by bit, and we have to be patient. So we have to be in it for the long game. We can't expect things to change overnight. Okay, so moving along, that is IPSO. Now, very quickly, we'll look at the BBC. Now, the BBC is interesting. It has its own editorial guidelines. So while all newspapers and publications come under IPSO, BBC, although it's a broadcaster, does not straight away come under Ofcom. They have their own editorial guidelines. The most relevant to us are due accuracy and due impartiality, which are self-explanatory. And there is a clause on the coverage of religion. If you want to complain to the BBC about something that you see on TV or hear on the radio or read online, you complain to them in the first instance. And if it isn't satisfactorily resolved, you can now, as of 2017, escalate that to Ofcom. So the BBC now also falls under Ofcom, but you must go to them first. Now, I've mentioned Ofcom already a couple of times. Who are they? Ofcom is the Office of Communications, and they are a governmental organization. So, which means that all broadcasting in the United Kingdom is government regulated, unlike the press. The press is not government regulated. So the most relevant sections of Ofcom's code are the following: coverage of religion, due impartiality, due accuracy, and undue prominence of views and opinions. So obviously, content has to be impartial, it has to be accurate, and one opinion or view should not be given more airtime than another or than the opposing. They have to have the range of views presented equally. Fairness, which refers to how contributors are treated as well. So these are sections that you might want to look into making a complaint under. Now, Ofcom is quite different from IPSO. They can impose penalties, and for repeat or severe offenders, it can go so far as revoking their license. And for this reason, in the broadcast media, I will be honest, you are far less likely to see an offensive or a problematic coverage because Ofcom can get in there and fine them if they do. So if they are found to be lying about something. However, I will put one caveat. We're talking about facts-based programming, so news programming. With fictional things, it's a little bit different. Obviously, fiction can be, completely fantasized, but it should still not be offensive and so on. But another thing that is important to realize is that in the case of broadcasting, if you find something is biased and it is part of a series of programs, the ruling or the complaint must cover the entire series of programs. So if one episode, let's say that you had an episode on world religions, and you found that one episode included some information about Islam that was biased against Islam. But in the next episode, that the other side of the story was told. That wouldn't be something that we could complain about because over the course of the whole series, the range of views was given. So that would be considered as balanced. So we do have to be careful that if we're talking about a series of programs is taken as one program with Ofcom and with the BBC as well. Somebody is saying, what about international media that have offices in the UK? Jazakallah khair, I actually forgot to mention that. Yes. So if an organization publishes in the UK and has an office in the UK, they fall under UK regulations. One prime example of this would be Arabic television stations that have bureaus in London. So for example, Al Jazeera and so on, they absolutely fall under Ofcom regulations. Things that are available on free-to-air satellite from abroad are not necessarily under Ofcom if they don't have a physical presence in the UK. However, there have been times where extremely problematic content was being broadcast into the UK on these free-to-air satellite channels from various countries. And because of the number of complaints that were sent to Ofcom and to the government, they were actually removed from those satellite platforms. So there is always something that can be done if there's something particularly, say, for example, racist information or Islamophobic information or anti-Semitic information or anything that is, you know, likely to cause tensions in the public, that can be dealt with. Somebody, oh, there's a lot of comments, mashallah. Okay, what if, for example, an individual on one day, someone like Piers Morgan says something offensive, it's not a series, not news. Okay, Jazakallah khair, that's a good point. So Piers Morgan obviously is a TV host of a regular show. No, you can complain about those individual shows. I'm talking about a series that would be, say, 5 episodes long. Right, say a documentary series that is 4 or 5 episodes long, you would have to count those 4 or 5 episodes as one. But if it's a continuous morning news program, no, that's that individual show. Jazakallah khair for asking that. That's an important clarification. You said the press cannot be pursued for Islamophobia. It is the same case for anti-Semitism. I was wondering if Islamophobia is considered differently in the UK. Okay, excellent question. It is now Islamophobia Awareness Month, and while anti-Semitism does have a semi-official definition, Islamophobia's semi-official definition has yet to be completely adopted by all of the major political parties. I would really encourage everybody this month to take a look at the work that the Muslim Council of Britain is doing on getting all major political parties to adopt the new definition of Islamophobia. We can't start to make laws based on Islamophobia being a crime until we have an official definition. So it's very important that this definition be ratified and be agreed upon and be accepted in the government so that it can become part of law. Without that, there's not a whole lot we can do. Very good question about the anti-Semitism. I'm not sure about the status of the definition of anti-Semitism. I know that some political parties have adopted it, some have adopted alternative definitions and so on. It's the same with the Islamophobia definition, to be honest, but please do take a look at the work that the MCB is doing. And if you have the time and the resources to help us spread awareness of this, that would be fantastic. You can look at mcb.org.uk and see all of the events that we've got coming up to include this Islamophobia definition events. Thank you for that. Yeah. Does Ofcom reveal our identity to the organization in the notice to them? You have a choice in this. So when you go to Ofcom to do a complaint, you cannot put your contact details. You can submit it anonymously. Now, the difficulty with that is that then Ofcom can't get back to you. Ofcom would not reveal your personal details to the organization you are complaining about, though. That would not be in keeping with GDPR laws, with data protection laws. So they would not reveal your identity. You're not taking up a legal case against an organization. You're asking a government organization to look at what has happened. A lot of the times, Ofcom will field dozens of complaints, if not hundreds, about a particular incident. So you can be assured that it's not just you complaining. The Conservatives would never agree to that, to agree to what? To the Islamophobia definition? That's what we're working on. You know, hopefully they will. You know, if the public pressures them enough, they possibly will. What other questions are there? Okay, I think I've got all the questions. Oops, somebody's in the waiting room. Okay, so let's move along. So Sayed Rahim is asking, but the newspaper editors themselves sit on the Ofcom boards. You mean the IPSO boards, I think. That's actually a very good question. Yes, they do sit on the board. They do not necessarily see your personal details. I will double check that for you. That is actually a very good question. At what point, yeah, who does see your contact details when you make a complaint to IPSO? I mean, if for any particular reason you feel uncomfortable with complaining to IPSO, you can, of course, ask CfMM to do it on your behalf. But I mean, I have done literally hundreds of complaints to the media on a personal capacity, and I've never had anybody come after me, if that's what you're worried about. You know, it's not, I've never had anybody say, oh, you're the one who complained about that. Most of the time, Ipso as well is receiving lots of complaints about various things. So, you know, you can be assured of anonymity as far as the paper themselves are concerned. But I will double check that just to make sure. The point is that Islamophobia is mixed usually with racism. Maybe they can be sued for that. Well, the new definition of Islamophobia does equate it as being a type of racism. I really do encourage you, I don't have time to go into it today, unfortunately. I do encourage you to go and see the definition yourself. If you type in, if you go to MCB's website, there are links to it there. And I will send out links to everybody as well so that you can take a look at it. But that is part of it, yes. Racism is definitely part of it. But as to whether or not they can be sued, again, it depends on the threshold. To what degree have they broken these rules? Yes, Ipso. I knew what you meant. So, okay, let's continue on then. So we've covered who is Ipso, who is the BBC, Ofcom, what regulations. Now, there are obviously going to be certain things that we cannot complain about. And when I say cannot, what I mean is that these are not necessarily things that well, obviously the codes don't cover them, but also they are not the type of things that we should be looking at when we're talking about discrimination in the press or biased reporting. And some of these might surprise you, but anyway, criticism of religious ideas. Now, it is perfectly fine in Britain to criticize religious ideas. And this is, to me, at any rate, this is quite common sense. Now, some people might become emotional about this, and that is completely within your prerogative, but we have to think about this rationally. Criticism does not mean slandering, lying, you know, spreading falsehood about it. It means critiquing, engaging and critiquing. It means disagreeing. And of course, anybody can disagree with any idea. That's within your rights. You know, Muslims disagree with Christian ideas in some cases. We disagree with Hindu ideas in some cases, and we are allowed to do that just as they are allowed to disagree with us. So criticizing religious ideas is fine. However, again, you cannot lie about it. So if there is a lie being told or an inaccuracy being told in this criticism, that would fall under accuracy guidelines. Okay, but it is usually mocking, like the Ramadan case you showed us. Yes, the mocking, again, it would not necessarily breach any ipso clauses, but you can definitely write to the paper and say to them that this is not on, that you can't do this. And you can also complain to ipso on any basis that you want and ask them to have it changed. They may still look at the case, especially in something that reaches that level. But yes, the mocking, you know, not always that we can complain about these things in terms of rules and regulations. Criticism of religious figures. Again, accuracy comes into this. People are permitted by British law to criticize, to engage with, and to disagree with, and to be critical of, but they cannot lie about it in the papers if it is a factual article. So we need to be aware of that. Any relevant religion of a person's race or religion or other protected category. So if it is relevant to the article that the person is Muslim, that's fine. They are allowed to publish that. And again, discrimination against another person. We can't necessarily complain about that according to IPSA regulations. However, what we can do is, if we know that person, encourage them to complain. If we know the person, encourage them to get others to complain on their behalf. And what I would actually say is, even if it doesn't fall under clause 12, still try to complain about it, because we want this rule changed. And if there are enough complaints going in saying this violates clause 12, this is discrimination, then hopefully we can get that clause changed. Let me see. Would UK regulations class Charlie Hebdo types as criticism? This is actually a very good question. It could be seen as incitement. So I don't know. I think this would require a legal expert, to be totally honest. No, I don't think that's just purely criticism. I think that that could be considered incitement. Allah knows best. Somebody else is saying Muslims should also have social contact, friendship with general non-Muslims to counter the image. Yes, of course. Our day-to-day life should be dawah. Yes, that goes without saying, jazakallah khair. And somebody else is saying, I think it is mocking. It is mocking, but there is no law against mocking, unfortunately. I wish there were, but there isn't. Discrimination in the media article or inside the organization against its employees, for example. Can we report a media organization for discrimination in the workplace? If you know somebody who is experiencing discrimination in the workplace, yes, absolutely, get them to take action, of course. But that doesn't, unfortunately, that's not what we're talking about today. But of course, they can be, and that's not something that IPSO would deal with. That would be a HR matter, a human resources matter, but definitely that should be taken up. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue on. Yes, and again, discrimination against a group. But again, I'm going to say this, most discrimination includes inaccuracies. So if you can show that there is an inaccuracy in a discriminatory statement, you can complain on that basis. So that is what I encourage everybody to try to do, I try to encourage everybody to complain on the basis of accuracy. You are far more likely to get a response that way and to get a change made that way. Now, how can you and I get involved in this? And I'm going to take you through some examples in a few minutes. But the first thing that we need to do is to read widely. Now, this is something that we tend not to do. We tend to read papers that confirm our way of thinking. So, you know, mostly Muslim people will read The Guardian and The Independent and maybe the Metro, you know, the papers that aren't publishing anti-Muslim stuff. We need to read way more widely than that. We need to read the right-wing stuff. We need to know what's being said. When we see something, don't just go by what's in the headline, read the whole article. Look at exactly how people are writing about Muslims and Islam and understand the narratives. Some of it is very subtle, and we'll see some examples. Some of them are really, really subtle, and they might even go over our heads. And I've got one example in my workshop coming up that is, I have a lot of places who always say, where I will always have people in my sessions who will say, no, but that's good for us, isn't it? And you'll see which one I mean. So really read widely and get to know the different narratives that are out there. Then the next step, if you see something wrong, ask yourself, does the code apply to this? And if it does, get in there and make your complaint. And I would add to this, when you complain, copy me in to your complaint, or copy CfMM into your complaint, admin@cfmm.org.uk. And then we can also help you if it needs to be escalated. Question from, I can't read your name, Faisal Doji. I sit on the Press Council of South Africa. Oh, wow. Are you in South Africa now? That's amazing. Equivalent of IPSO. One of the challenges we face is that a lot of the bigotry and discrimination is moving online. Yes, we've included in our press code regulation, including online publications, but because of limited resources, monitoring online is becoming increasingly difficult. What is the situation in the UK? Brilliant question. Jazakallah khair for that. And you are in South Africa. Welcome. I think you probably win the prize for having attended from the furthest away place. MashaAllah. Okay, what I would say to that, now IPSO covers newspapers and their online counterparts. So we have, for example, the Daily Mail, and we have the Mail Online, we have the Sun, we have sun.co.uk, we have Independent, and we have independent.com. So it covers all of those. In terms of websites by themselves, no, IPSO doesn't cover them. And yes, we are in an era of fake news, unfortunately. There are organizations such as Full Fact and Snopes, I think, that are fact-checking organizations. So if you see something online, you can have it fact-checked by them. However, there isn't a whole lot that can be done. If a website is publishing something that is inflammatory, now I need to check this, but I have a feeling it might fall under Ofcom regulations, because Ofcom also It's to do with everything broadcast and internet related. I need to double check that, but it isn't as regulated, and there is a big problem with it as well. Things like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter as well. You know, anybody can write anything on there and suddenly it's, you know, going viral. So this is absolutely an issue. You know, one of our things is, you know, encouraging organizations to engage with the big social media platforms, especially to stop the spread of this misinformation and bigotry. But I'm not sure exactly how it works. Obviously, if a website is publishing something that is inciting to violence or inflammatory or something, that can be a criminal matter, and it might be a matter for the police, depending on where the website is actually published from. I've seen, for example, a newspaper that was, a so-called news website that was part of an extremist group from India, and they were publishing inflammatory material about Muslims. And I believe the owner of the website was actually arrested for incitement to racial violence. So in extreme cases, that can happen. But we don't have a general regulatory body yet, as far as I'm aware. I would say that we do need one. So that's an excellent input. Thank you for that. And somebody else attending from Saudi Arabia, welcome. Thank you for coming. Can you please write these fake news monitoring? They are coming up. They are in the presentation. Somebody else is saying, I live in a majority Muslim country and Islamophobia is rare here, although it still exists. What can I do to help? Well, if you see something being published in, I mean, obviously we're all on the internet, you can do a complaint, even wherever you are, even if you're in South Africa or Saudi Arabia or Malaysia or wherever you are. If you see something on a British news website that you know is wrong, you can complain to them as well. You can complain to IPSO as well. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's how you can help us here, inshallah. Okay, continuing on, what else can we do? Because it's not just about complaining. What we are doing at the Center for Media Monitoring includes the following. We have successfully campaigned for IPSO to publish guidelines on reporting on Muslims and Islam, and we have input into their guidelines, and we are continuing to input into their guidelines because it is an ever-changing document. We have identified changes required within the current editor's code, and we fed into consultations with them. CfMM has won more IPSO cases than anyone else to date, alhamdulillah. And we are campaigning, we are encouraged campaigning for an inquiry into press racism and due prominence in corrections. So these are just some of the things that organizations can get involved in. But what can we do on the ground? Engaging directly with editors by writing letters to the editor, by emailing them directly. We also give training and awareness raising for journalists. So my colleague, my manager, Rizwana Hamid, she engages with all of the media industry organizations. We do roundtables for journalists to discuss particular issues. We do awareness workshops for journalists and editors as well, just to make them more aware of what the problems actually are. And again, inputting into guidance. So for example, we have our terrorism report, input into the IPSO guidelines, and so on. What else can we do? Lobbying for a Liaison compliant regulator is important. And I haven't talked about Liaison at all, but IPSO is basically a stopgap. The Liaison inquiry recommended a particular set of criteria in a media regulator was needed. That hasn't been met by IPSO. So getting involved in the lobby for a Liaison compliant regulator is important. Lobbying for changes to the rule of due prominence. At the moment, if a newspaper has to publish a correction, it doesn't have to be the same size or even the same page as the original article. So that awful article that we looked at about the Muslim foster care, the correction for that was a tiny little thing on the front page. The fact that it was on the front page was a big deal. What we want is that when somebody publishes something on the front page, the correction should also be on the front page. We want to encourage that everybody sees the correction who saw the original article. And lobbying against unverified reporting. We need to make it so that newspapers know that if they don't verify what they are reporting, they are going to get flooded with people emailing them and complaining. And that will discourage them from doing it in the first place, because it costs them, in effect, money, because they have to pay their staff for every hour that they are looking at corrections and looking at complaints. So if we can all get together and make it really difficult for them, they are less likely to do it. Does CfMM provide advice on the best strategy methods for most effective lobbying? You can get in touch about that. When I send out the email, you can get in touch about that and I can refer you. I can signpost you, definitely. Is there a child-friendly site or go-to for when they see something that should be reported? That's a good idea. Not that I'm aware of, but I will take a look at that. That's a very good question. Excellent. There are lots of other organizations working in this area as well. Stop Funding Hate is one. They campaign to get companies to stop advertising in papers that publish things that are problematic. They've had a lot of successes. Hacked Off is an organization that is campaigning for a Leveson compliant regulator. They have a lot of celebrity endorsements. They do fantastic work. I would really recommend looking at their website as well. Full Fact is a fact-checking organization. Definitely they need our support too. And then all of the different anti-racism organizations like Stand Up to Racism, Show Racism the Red Card, and so on. There are so many more, but all of these organizations deserve our help and we should all be working together with them. And we do engage with these organizations as well. Fantastic work that they are doing. They have different tactics than we do maybe, but if when they're doing their thing and we're doing our thing all together, it will have a big impact. Oh, a couple more questions. In the Northeast, we have had a school head teacher send a letter to Bangladeshi parents stating their behavior led to COVID cases rising. Seriously? Okay. Okay, that's really appalling. I am very sorry to hear that. I'm not sure how we can help, but if you drop me an email, just as reply to the email I'm going to send out to you guys over the next couple of days, I will see if I can signpost you to somebody who can. That's really awful. Somebody else is saying, when we talk about media representation is super important. I know many young people who want to go into working with mainstream media. Does CfMM have advice, training, or workshops on this? Thank you for asking. I will touch on that in a little bit. Yes, we do have a workshop coming up. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to take you all through some examples of media stories that were biased, that did feed into narratives, not necessarily in a blatant way like the Muslim foster family case, but in more subtle ways. But these are equally dangerous because they drip feed into the British public psyche, and we all need to take a look out for these. And I'm going to show you which, how these were changed in a positive way. So we have this story, swapping the Queen's birthday for Ramadan. Pepsi allows its Australian staff to switch public holidays so they only have days off when it is more culturally relevant. Pepsi is allowing its Muslim staff to swap a public holiday for an Islamic day off. Days like the Queen's birthday and Labor Day can be substituted for Ramadan. American soft drink giant said it wanted staff to have, quote, culturally relevant, end quote, leisure. Now, this is the bit where you guys need to put your thinking caps on. What do you think of this headline and the subheadings? Is there a basis for complaining? If you think yes, why? If you think no, why not? What code would you apply to it? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to either raise your hand or put it in the chat box, either way. But what do you think? Do you think that we can complain about this? Do you think that we can't? If you're going to complain, what code would you base the complaint on? Now, I should state that this is Daily Mail Australia. So the Queen's birthday and Labor Day refers to Australia, where these days are national holidays, are bank holidays, so to speak. Queen's birthday is not a bank holiday in the UK. So what do you guys think? Can we complain about this? Okay, so Jabil says, no basis for complaining in my opinion, but definitely something worth advising them over if possible. Seems like it's a good thing, but it's reported poorly. Always offering I always offer to do Christmas and bank holidays. I'm a doctor. Good, yeah. It's demonizing of Islamic practices, but in a smart way. Oh, that's interesting. No, we can't complain. If culturally relevant is Pepsi's line, then no. How come? Melissa, how come if culturally relevant is Pepsi's line, then no? I'm not sure I understand your comment. If you want to clarify it a bit more. It's actually a human resources matter. Well, yeah, it is. Is there anything in this article that would breach clause 1 accuracy? We should complain as it is biased. It's inaccurate by omission. All staff are entitled to have such holiday swaps. We had this rule at UBS years ago. So that's what Sayed says. And Alia says there's no basis for complaint. Interesting. Okay. Those of you who said there's no basis for complaint, it's not leisure. Okay, I think that's a bit, I think we're missing the point. And this is the article. Earlier on, I said, it's not leisure, hence inaccurate. Oh, I see what you mean. I think that's a matter of semantics, to be totally honest, because when they say leisure, they might just mean a day off work. You know, it's not a work day. So this is the article that I mentioned a little while ago, where I said a lot of people look at this and think, oh, this is actually not a bad thing. You know, and we're thinking, okay, Muslims getting Ramadan off instead of the Queen's birthday, that sounds like a good deal, doesn't it? Sayed has pointed out that everybody gets this. It's bias by omission. Yes, that is true. They show Muslims as a burden. Okay, that's a good point. So this article, first of all, there's a huge inaccuracy. And I'm going to hope that somebody gets it eventually. But what this article does is it feeds into the narrative. And remember, I had that list of narratives earlier. It feeds into the narrative of Muslims always asking for special treatment. That, you know, Muslims are getting the Queen's birthday. They'll work the Queen's birthday and get Ramadan off instead. Right? Pepsi is allowing Muslim staff to swap a public holiday. You know, Muslims getting special treatment. Again, we're always asking for special treatment, but there's a huge inaccuracy in here. Has anyone spotted it yet? I mean, it's just simple math. Shows Muslims do not respect the Queen. Well, Australia has a lot of Republicans, so I wouldn't, you know, that's not too much. Arrogant and extremist in terms of their practices. The Queen's birthday is one day, so we don't take the whole of Ramadan day. Yes, exactly. They're basically implying that we can work on the Queen's birthday and get the whole month of Ramadan off. I mean, that would be nice, but I don't think any company with an ounce of sense is going to offer that to its Muslim staff, right? And so, yes, it is very much showing that Muslims want special treatment. Now, it may be that they just don't know what Ramadan is, and so they just picked up a word. But the fact that they are saying that it is only Muslims is also inaccurate. There is no way that a company would pick out one minority over all the others. You know, what about all the people who want to celebrate, you know, Diwali or Hanukkah or, you know, Kwanzaa or any of the other holidays? So this was actually complained about, you'll be glad to know. And the result was this, a change in the headline and in the subheadings. So they've taken out the line about swapping the Queen's birthday for Ramadan, delete that completely. Just kept the second part. Pepsi allows its Australian staff to switch public holidays so they only have days off when it is more culturally relevant. Now, the part culturally relevant is in quotes. So this is something that somebody from Pepsi has actually said. The fact that Islam is not a culture, it's a religion. Yes, okay, we could argue that as well, but that's minor. Then we have here, Pepsi is allowing Muslim staff. No, Pepsi is allowing its staff to swap a public holiday for a religious event day off. Okay, not an Islamic day, a religious event day. Good. Days like the Queen's birthday and Labor Day can be substituted for Ramadan. Change to days like the Queen's birthday and Labor Day can be substituted for Eid. That's probably what they meant in the first place, but they didn't know. And then the third line is the same. So this is a few simple changes, one email sent off to Daily Mail Australia. This didn't even have to go through IPSO. Daily Mail Australia doesn't fall under IPSO anyway, but we managed to get this changed. So an easy change made. Okay, let's look at the next example. Experts fear a spike in UK coronavirus cases during Ramadan. Oh, question, sorry. Does this mean that the initial reference to the worker's religion was irrelevant? It was inaccurate because it wasn't only for Muslims, it's for everybody. Anybody who doesn't want to celebrate the Queen's birthday or Labor Day can take another day off if they have a faith day that they want to celebrate. So it wasn't only for Muslims. So it wasn't that mentioning the faith was irrelevant, which is clause 12. It was that mentioning that it's Islamic is inaccurate because it's not only for Muslims. Okay, so let's look at the next example. Experts fear a spike in UK coronavirus cases during Ramadan. The BMA, which is the British Medical Association, has called for an inquiry into why people from ethnic minorities seem disproportionately affected. So, what do you all think? Is there a basis for complaining about this? If yes, why? If no, why not? And if yes, what code would you apply? Okay, so somebody's saying, what's the scientific basis for such headline? Yes, no fact checks. Okay. Jazakallah khair for attending. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. They connected BMA to Ramadan. Yep, that is an issue. So do you think we could complain? Yes or no? Yes, 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 inaccuracy. Excellent, good. Now this one, I have to admit, it's a little bit difficult for maybe for you to judge just based on the headline. This is why not just looking at the headline is so important. You need to read the articles as well. And the fact of the matter is lots of us don't even do that. On the surface of it, this looks very discriminatory. It's implying that a group of experts are saying that the UK coronavirus cases are going to spike because of Ramadan, okay? And somehow linking it to ethnic minorities being disproportionately affected. Okay. So ethnic minority, even racism. I'm not sure that this would fall under clause 12 discrimination because the fact of the matter is ethnic minority groups, certain ethnic minority groups have been severely impacted by coronavirus more than other groups. So there is a relevant mention of ethnic minorities in general there. Clause 1, you think. Okay, so we're working on accuracy, right? And what we found here, this was a complaint that I put in myself. So the original article, which again was from our friends at the Times, said experts, plural, fear a spike. But when you read the article, it quotes one doctor in a hospital in Birmingham. And when I dug just a little bit, I found that doctor on Twitter and I contacted him. And he said to me, I am too busy to deal with this, but that is not what I said. And I really felt sorry for him. So I put in a complaint. And I mentioned in my complaint that I have spoken to the medic in question. What the doctor in question said when interviewed by the Times was that if people were to gather like they usually do in Ramadan, it might cause a spike, but we are in lockdown. So we can't gather. But what the newspapers took was people gathering in Ramadan causing spike, experts, plural, pure scaremongering, and linking Muslim religious practices to something negative, that being a spike in cases for Ramadan. What they are implying by linking it to the BMA's inquiry into why ethnic minorities suffer more from COVID-19 is essentially victim blaming, saying that the behavior of those ethnic minorities is why they're getting more sick and not looking at any other factors. So we put in a complaint on the basis of clause 1 accuracy, on the basis of the fact that it was not experts, it was one single person. and that he had said that if communities gathered, there would possibly be a spike, but we're in lockdown, so they're not going to. They changed it slightly to, rather than experts fear a spike in UK coronavirus cases, to expert fears a spike in UK coronavirus cases if communities gather for Ramadan. Now, in fairness, some people might have been saying, let's gather anyway. Some people might have been saying, oh, we have a bubble, we can gather, and so on and so forth. So for those people who might have been considering breaking the rules, if there were any, this would possibly act as a deterrent for them. But again, it puts it more into, it sheds light on the fact that it's only one person saying this, not a body of experts. Now, is this the best outcome for a headline change? No. I would prefer to see it changed completely. I would prefer to see that entire headline reworked just to talk about why are ethnic minorities more adversely affected by the coronavirus. But we pick our battles, especially with the Times. Moving on. Oh, that's doubled. I don't know why. Okay, next one. This is another one that I did myself. Coronavirus mass graves dug at London cemetery as Muslim community hit by pandemic. Oh, somebody's in the waiting room. Whoops, why isn't it advancing for me? Okay, there we go. So what do you guys think of this headline? Mass graves dug at London cemetery as Muslim community hit by pandemic. Kemnall Park Cemetery Grounds Special Projects Manager Richard Gummersall said the cemetery, quote, simply cannot keep up with demand, end quote, but is adamant it is still abiding by Muslim burial traditions. Is there a basis for complaint? If yes, why? If no, why not? And what code would you apply? Let's see. So many comments about the second headline with the Times. Yeah, I know, I'm not happy with it either. Yeah, and I have tried to escalate it, but they fixed the accuracy, so. Okay, is this specifically a cemetery for Muslims or just everyone and they focus on Muslims? No, it is a Muslim cemetery in London called Eternal Gardens, I think. Very nice place. It may mean as Muslims are mostly dying. Were there any other mass graves being dug? Okay, good question. Inaccurate information. So again, you need to read the full article, but actually in this case, I didn't read the full article. I only complained on the basis of the headline. If you could elaborate on what the issue being raised in this article. So this article is saying that the Muslim community in that area has been hit very badly by the pandemic and the local graveyard can't keep up. And so it's digging mass graves. They make it mean as if only Muslims are hit by the pandemic. Well, they're definitely shining a light on Muslims being hit by the pandemic more. That's true. So what do you guys think? Complain? Yes, no? And if you say yes, what clause? Or why? Of ipso, necessarily. Any ideas? Oh, wow, suddenly I have piles of inaccurate Nos mass graves. It's not clear it's a Muslim cemetery. So inaccurate, no, it is a Muslim cemetery actually, because he talked about abiding by Muslim burial traditions, so that is clear. Mass graves, is that the phrase? Yes, exactly. Clause one, yep, they mention Muslim burial traditions as if it is also a problem. Okay, that's an interesting point. What exactly does mass grave digging mean? Yes, imagery of mass graves is with, thank you, good. Mass graves was absolutely the issue. I complained to the Mirror on this. And there were a couple other newspapers who carried it as well. And one newspaper, actually, when I sent in my complaint, they just wrote me back and said, we're really sorry. If this was upsetting, we will remove it straight away. And they removed it straight away. The Mirror very actually graciously said, we didn't mean to cause upset or offense. We will change the wording straight away. So the wording was, the issue was mass graves. Now, mass graves, obviously, this isn't a matter of accuracy. And this is why we always recommend engaging with the paper in the first instance, because accuracy is one thing, but sometimes semantically a word may carry meaning that, while not inaccurate, is still upsetting to a community. Mass graves was one. Most people, when they think of the word mass graves, they think of Auschwitz, they think of Srebrenica, they think of the Congo, they think of so many genocidal massacres that have happened throughout the world. And we think of, you know, people dying en masse, being murdered en masse, and then buried en masse in a pile where we can't identify their remains when they're finally dug up. That is the mental image that the term mass graves conjures up in so many people's heads. So this headline was actually very upsetting for a lot of people. And the people who run this cemetery actually got in touch with me and said, this is not mass graves. Even our FAQ on our website says we're not digging mass graves. What they were digging was something called saf, which is basically a trench. So a long ditch dug in the ground, long and narrow, into which each body is shrouded, wrapped, placed individually, prayed over, and then covered, and then the next body. So it is, think of it as a series of graves that have been pre-dug so that they can be used quite quickly. This is not what people think of when they think of mass graves, quite clearly. So when I explained this to the papers, one of them just said, okay, we'll just delete the article because it's inaccurate. And the other paper said, okay, thank you for letting us know, we will change the wording. Another paper has insisted that it's not inaccurate and they still carry the term mass graves. And it has been escalated to IPSO. Procedures with IPSO do take time, however. Rizwan is saying that's what my 11-year-old just said. What did she just? Mass grave is like Sarajevo, exactly. Sure. Okay, my laptop keeps freezing. I do apologize. Okay, so we have here, now this is our last example, and this is an old one. From the Telegraph, this is from years ago, but this is an interesting example, and this is why I have it on here. We have a headline that says, Lord Ahmed admits sending text message while driving just before fatal crash. Lord Ahmed, the Muslim peer, has admitted dangerous driving after sending text messages while driving over 60 miles per hour on a motorway just before a crash in which a father of 2 died. Now, as I said, this is very old. This is over 10 years old, this article. But I'm bringing it in because it's an interesting example of, well, you'll see what it's an interesting example of. So for those of you who don't know, Lord Ahmed is a member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom, has been for quite a while. He's quite well known in the British public. And many years ago, he was involved in a car crash in which the driver of the other car died. He was found guilty for that. He has done his time for that. But he was admitting in the court that just before the crash happened, he had been texting on his phone. Nowadays, texting on your phone while driving is illegal. Back then it wasn't, but it was used as evidence that he had been driving dangerously, which he admitted. Okay, so let me see here. Is there a basis for complaint? If yes, why? If no, why not? And what clause would you apply? So, lots of people. It's irrelevant that he was Muslim, okay? We can't complain on his behalf. His faith isn't relevant to the crash. We can only encourage him to complain if he chooses to. Sayed, you're listening. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Irrelevant reference to Ahmed's religion and hence cause of complaint. Yes, writing the Muslim peer is wrong. Okay, the Muslim peer. Excellent. Very good. You are all paying attention. What clause is it? What's the number of the clause? Do you know? 12. Good. I love it when I have evidence that people are actually learning. This is brilliant. Okay, alhamdulillah. So yes, it is clause 12 of the IPSO clause. Now, as some of you pointed out, we can't complain unless he appoints us to complain on his behalf, which he could do. In theory, he could appoint CfMM or MCB or any other organization to complain on his behalf, or he could do it himself because it's discrimination. You and I, as individuals who don't know him, technically speaking, the clause doesn't apply to us to complain. However, my advice is complain anyway and quote clause 12 anyway, because we want them to change this rule, okay? But good to know the rule. However, this was complained about. Now, this was back in the day before IPSO. There was IPSO's predecessor, which is the Press Complaints Commission, but they did have similar rules, and the complaint was not upheld. Can an individual appoint another individual rather than an organization to complain on their behalf? I believe so, yes. I believe that they can. So like your representative kind of thing, yes. Okay, so this was not upheld. Why do you think that is? It was complained to on the grounds of discrimination, on the grounds of irrelevant mention of his faith, but it was not upheld. Isn't this discrimination against an individual and so no reason of complaint? Lord Ahmed himself appointed somebody to complain on his behalf, and it was not upheld. So all the rules were followed. The actual person complained, clause 12 was said, they told him no. Why do you think that was? It's actually a really compelling reason for it. Because they think it is the same as Lord Ahmed. Well, he is Lord Ahmed. I don't understand your comment. Sorry, Mariam. He is Muslim, his name. Yes, okay, so he is Muslim and it is accurate. But he didn't complain on the basis of accuracy. He complained on the basis of discrimination because mentioning his faith is not relevant to him driving dangerously, and it's not relevant to the case. If anybody gets this, why, you get a golden star. Publicly known already. Ooh, Melissa, could you explain a little bit more? You're very, very warm. He wasn't texting about something religious. No, good guess. Interesting guess. I mean, it's already obvious from his name, so deleting it won't change. Not necessarily. I've met people with the surname Ahmed who aren't Muslim. Yes, thank you, Melissa. Nail on the head, because he's a public figure. And it's not just that his religion is known. I'll give this one to Melissa. She gets the gold star. MashaAllah, very good, excellent work. It's not just that his religion is publicly known, is that his public persona is based on the fact that he's Muslim. So Lord Ahmed was the first, well, he wasn't the first Muslim in the House of Lords. Actually, that's there was somebody else in the House of Lords in the 1800s who converted to Islam, but he is the first in this century, as far as I know. He pushes his public persona as being the first Muslim member of the House of Lords. He is the first one to have prayers in the House of Lords. He's the one who got halal food in the House of Lords. He's the one. So his entire public persona is based on the fact that he is a Muslim. And what the IPSO predecessor, the PCC, ruled was that because his public persona is based on him being Muslim, it's relevant regardless of whether he's doing good or not. And the key here was the fact that they called him the Muslim peer. This particular Muslim peer, you can almost capitalize the whole thing. If they had said, Lord Ahmed, a Muslim peer, that would have been different because that's general. But because it was specific, it was counted as being relevant. And the lesson that I think that most Muslim people should take away from this is that if we seek to be in the public eye, and if we base our fame on the back of our Muslim identity, we have to be very careful not to do anything untowards ever, because it'll come out and our Muslim identity will be dragged through the mud because of it. So, you know, I think that serves as a lesson for everybody who seeks to be in the public eye. Like if they say the hijabi, if that person has built their identity on being a hijabi, then yes, that would be fair. Okay, was there only one Muslim peer when it was published? I'm not sure if he was the only Muslim peer at that time, but he definitely always promotes himself as the first. So, you know, he's the first Muslim to enter the House of Lords. So Yeah, it might be that he was still the only one at that time. And somebody's saying, this is interesting. If somebody is obviously Black and a paper mentions this without relevance, couldn't the same argument apply? If their public persona is based off the fact that they are Black, which isn't very likely in this day and age, to be honest. You know, if, I mean, I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, if somebody lived in a society where there were no people of color and he was the only Black person, then possibly, right? But in the UK, that's very unlikely to happen because, you know, we have a very diverse culture and very diverse society. So that's, you know, yes, like Obama, very good point, like President Obama, the first Black president. So it's entirely fair to mention his skin color when referring to him in terms of his presidency. Yes, good point, good. Okay, so that was our last example, and we have gone over time as usual. So, whoops. Okay, so we've looked at different things that we can complain about. We've looked at the different narratives. We've looked at what the problem is and the ways that we can challenge it, the way that Center for Media Monitoring is challenge it. But it's not just about complaining. There's so much else we can do. We need to actively engage with the media. Not surprisingly, there is a culture of distrust between a lot of Muslim communities and the media. We need to overcome that, engage proactively. If you see something good in the media, write a letter to the editor and commend them. Write a letter to the author and thank them for writing what they've written. Definitely. Positive feedback encourages more of the same. At the MCB, we are also working with the media to increase religious literacy and awareness. We promote positive news stories from the community. So if you have something that you want us to talk about, send it in and we will do our best to talk about it. And obviously empowering the community to engage, like what we've been doing tonight, but I also run other sort of upskilling workshops. I run workshops on writing press releases, doing media interviews, crisis media management, and so on. If you work for an organization, volunteer for an organization, or just have a group of interested people that you want to get together for a workshop, I'm here for you, absolutely. There's other things we can do too. We need to increase Muslim voices. We need to up the volume on Muslim voices. If you see Muslim content being created on social media, share it, upvote it, like it, retweet it, whatever you need to do to make it more widely heard. We need to encourage our youth to consider journalism as a career path. And if you are looking at a career change, consider journalism as a career path. And to that end, on the 24th of this month, we are holding a panel discussion and workshop called Muslims in the Media. It's going to be starting at 6:30, running until 8:30. We have a panel of Muslim journalists from various different organizations doing various different roles within the media. They're going to be talking about how they got into journalism, how you can get into journalism, and they're going to be there to do some small group breakout sessions as well with all of the participants so that you can get advice and tips from them and talk about what also they can be doing to improve the narrative around Muslims and Islam in the media. Oh, somebody's saying they did a career change 10 years ago into journalism too. Excellent, excellent. I want to talk to you more. That is it from me. If you have any last questions, I can take them now. I have gone very over time and I do apologize for that, but I hope this has been beneficial. I hope that you've learned something. For a lot of you, it might have been a revision, but you know, repeating things is always good. It reinforces it. If you want to give us some feedback, please do. I'll be sending out an email follow-up with links, with a link to a feedback form. It would be fantastic if you could give us your feedback because I'm always trying to improve our offering. And if you have any questions, you can also then get back in touch with me because you'll have my own email address. Do we have a Twitter account? We can't let Miqdad. Okay, so Miqdad Varsi, Miqdad Varsi founded the Center for Media Monitoring. He's our big boss, mashallah. But our Twitter account is at CfMM UK. He always retweets us too, so you should see us around. Who else? Thank you very much. Jazakallahu iyyakum, barakallahu feekum. That was amazing. Oh, jazakallahu khair for that. Ameen, ameen, ameen. I'm so glad that you guys have benefited from it. And I do hope to see you all on the 24th. It should be a very good workshop. And one last, how can we complain if we were in an EU country? If the paper is also in the EU, you will have to look up your own regulatory bodies. But if you're talking about a UK paper, you can complain to IPSO as well. The research and publication is all on our website, which you'll be getting a link to, inshallah. One last thing, if you have benefit from this, if you think that the work that CfMM is doing is valuable and is needed in the community, please do consider donating to us as a cause. It's muslimgiving.org/MCB-CfMM. You will also be getting this link set out to you, but even if you just can donate a small amount, it all makes a huge difference. We are non-profit, obviously, and we do rely on donations to keep ourselves going. The event has been recorded. I'm going to go through it, make sure that there aren't any serious glitches that I need to edit out, and then hopefully upload it to YouTube at a later date. So you'll all be notified of that as well, inshallah. The name of the founder, I will write it. So our founder's name is Miqdad Farsi. My manager's name is Rizwana Hamid, although she's not on social media, but she's here tonight. And my name is Amanda Morris, and our media monitor and our main researcher is Faisal Hanif, does an amazing job with all of our reports. Please keep us all in your dua. Do check out our website and all of our publications as well. If there's no other questions, then Jazakallah khair for all your time. Thank you so much, all of you who attended. I know we've had a really wide range of people in the audience, and I hope it was of benefit. Thank you so much and good night. Assalamu alaikum.